Meeting, and we're moving on to item number 5, discussion and public hearing on a resolution PC 22-10, a resolution to approve amendments to the future land use map and the comprehensive land use plan update December 2012 for portions of Kingston Pike, Smith Road, Boring Road study area.
This item was also discussed in August as a workshop item with the Planning Commission. And I'll kind of go through that again since it's been a couple of months, just give you a brief overview of how we got to this point. But basically, this resolution represents a several-month process that we've had with community engagement. Started back over a year ago, actually. And I noted at the meeting last time that, like other priority areas that we've looked at in the last few years, we engaged the community to try to get an idea of what they might want to see in this particular part of the town. This is kind of in the central part of the town. You got Boring Road, Smith Road, Kingston Pike, that are all in this particular area. And the purpose of engaging the community was to evaluate whether the vision that we have mapped in our comprehensive land use plan update is current, or if there's some things that might need to be revisited, updated, modified, clarified, whatever. Now, this study area was a little bit more complex than some of the other ones, like McPhee Road, even North Watt Road, Outlet Drive, the other areas that we've looked at so far. A little bit more diverse, and so we ended up dividing it into different sub-areas because you have some kind of fairly commercialized areas down along Kingston Pike, and then the further you get out, like on Boring Lane, it's very rural, very agricultural, so it's pretty diverse. So in the visual preference surveys, we tried to give people reasonable options based on different parts of this overall study area. So one thing, just to give you some background to the current map, and that's the current map that's on the screen. When that was updated in 2012, this was actually the community's first effort to map its future land use when we updated the Transportation and Land Use Policy Plan in 2012. And the idea was this is kind of in the central part of the town. It's a very important part of the town. There's some surrounding existing subdivisions, some newer developments as well. And at the time, the old Ingalls was in very poor condition. And the consultants that worked with the town and the community felt like that potentially would be demolished. And this might be, because of its centralized location and the other residential fairly close by, a possible location for a mixed-use neighborhood type of development. And to help support that, a lot of the area around the mixed-use neighborhood land use, which was what a lot of stuff along Kingston Pike was designated, and I'll highlight that. It's basically that dark red, purple kind of color. A little bit hard to see on the screen there, but so that was mixed-use neighborhood, and then a lot of the area around it was shown as medium-density residential at the time, and that was to provide for a residential density that could help support the mixed-use neighborhood, so that you had a sufficient number of people that would be in a convenient walking distance to that mixed-use neighborhood area. Of course, like other areas that we've looked at in the town, things change. The community is constantly evolving. Our plan and our map is constantly evolving. We've made changes in all these other sub-areas that we've looked at to bring them more in line with reality or different, preferences that are in place. The old Ingalls was renovated. It wasn't demolished, so you have a traditional kind of, arterial commercial in that area. So that idea of a mixed-use neighborhood really never came to fruition. And then so the residential density shown to support that also came into question, especially since in other parts of the town we've had some high-density residential projects that have been approved. Overlook at Campbell Station was completed a couple years ago. We have a project under construction at South Watt Road and over at the town center at Biddle Farms. We've also had some attached single-family projects in recent years. So, again, these kinds of situations, and then some of the developments that are existing in this area that weren't mapped properly were all things that we asked the community to look at. Up along Boring Road, some of those areas have been recently kind of established into estate lots, for example, in that area. Then this lot here is one property owner currently. Of course, that could change, but it is pretty rural when you get, again, back to this kind of northeast intersection of Boring Road and Boring Lane. Very beautiful part of the town. Some incredible trees out in that area. So again, the point was bring in the community like we've done otherwise, see what their thoughts were, give them some images to react to. And based on the predominant input that we received, the staff prepared a map that was for the workshop discussion in August and showed different things that either updated the map to reflect how land is being used in actuality, or to update based on things that have just simply changed, just like they did in Watt Road and McPhee Road. So with that, we did get some comments at the August meeting, and the Planning Commission asked the staff to put together a resolution for consideration, and that's what's before you tonight, Resolution PC-22-10. This only goes to the Planning Commission. It doesn't go to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen because it's not involving the mixed-use town center. And let me go through these different areas that we're proposing to amend in this resolution, and I can kind of describe what's going on here. And Area A here, that's where NHC is currently located. That was shown as medium density residential on our current map, and what we've done there is just change that to civic institutional, because that's the land use that best corresponds to that type of use. Now keep in mind this future land use map doesn't have any requirements associated with it. It's not like the zoning map, where basically whatever a property zoned is pretty much what you can do with it. And it has requirements embedded in it. The future land use map is just a vision tool. We can use it when we create ordinances or update ordinances, or when we look at rezoning requests, we can refer to it. But again, it's not something that has to be followed. It's not something that, again, has requirements embedded in it, at least outside of the mixed-use town center. So Area A was really just cleaning up the map to make it compatible with how land's being used. Area B, to the north of that, that's some property that's currently zoned R4, which is attached single family. And that particular zoning district, again, what would be allowed for that property, allows up to 6 dwelling units per acre. And so the future land use map has it currently shown as medium density residential, and that's 6 to 8 dwelling units per acre. just in terms of density. And so the proposal there for that area was to change that to low-density residential, and that's 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre. And the reason for that is just bringing the future land use map in line with how the property is zoned in terms of density. Area C, this is one that I had an error on that corrected, but basically this area, we were updating the future land use map for enterprise rent-a-car. It's currently shown as a mixed-use neighborhood, and we're changing it to commercial because that's how the land is actually being used. The area between the Weigels and the enterprise rent-a-car we're showing as a mixed-use neighborhood. Potentially something like what is being developed potentially out there at the end of Watt Road with those townhomes and the retail buildings. Something like that on this piece of property is what the logic is behind that particular land use designation. Area D is Ingalls and Old Ingalls. Let me get a different color here. That's not going to show up. Okay, D. That's a mixed-use neighborhood. As I mentioned earlier, the Old Ingalls was maybe a candidate for mixed-use neighborhood back when this was mapped originally. We're proposing to change that to the commercial land use because that's really how the land's being used. Area D and Area E, another change to the future land use map. This is medium density residential, but it's zone buffer. There's a buffer strip and a buffer zone to the north of the Ingalls, and so Area E we're proposing to change to open space because that's most consistent with the buffer zoning district. Area F to the north of that, that area is currently specified as medium density residential, and I kind of alluded to the logic behind that back when this was originally mapped. The property zoned R1, which is rural residential, so you've got medium density residential, which is 6 to 8 units per acre if you're just looking at density. R1 is really less than 2 units per acre, and that's what you can do with the property right now. What we're proposing there is to change that to very low density residential from medium density residential, and that would make that area more compatible with the built densities to the north at Baldwin Park and at Waverly Court. Baldwin Park has a density of 2.37. Waverly Court's about 4.3. So that kind of fits in with that range. Very low density residential is 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre, which is twice the density of what the property is currently zoned. So that was kind of the logic on that one. F, G, same thing here. That's medium density residential currently. And again, what we're proposing there is very low density residential. As I mentioned, that's in line with the density of those two subdivisions that are on each side of that particular part of the study area. And again, that's twice the density of what the property is currently zoned. H, you're getting north of Boring Road, and that gets a little bit more rural. It does back up to Fox Den in that area. That's currently, a lot of that area is currently shown as low density residential, which is actually 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre, which is, you know, pretty high for that area, at least in its current condition. What we're proposing there, just because of kind of, as I mentioned earlier, kind of what's evolved in that part of the corridor, is rural residential, and that's over 1 acre lots for that land use. Same thing with I. This is, again, currently a very rural part of the corridor. It's kind of where Boring Road and Boring Lane intersect. A lot of the feedback that we received from these 3 workshops, the community really wanted to see that general part of the study area kind of retain its rural agricultural character. So again, that's what's being proposed there. In I, it would be rural residential, over 1 acre lot. Same way with J, again, for the same reasons. Rural residential for that area. Let's see. And K is, there's a couple of things that have always been on this map, but they weren't discussed as discussion items in August because they're really, frankly, no-brainers. K is an area that's currently zoned residential. It backs up to Fox Den. And instead of extending the mixed-use neighborhood all the way to Fox Den, we're proposing a very low-density residential in there to kind of transition from the mixed-use neighborhood to, the very low-density residential in Fox Den. L is another map cleanup. Basically, that property is on the east intersection of Sugarwood Drive and Kingston Pike. It's currently zone buffer, so we're just basically proposing to change the future land use to open space because that reflects the zoning. And then finally, M is the area where Click's Funeral Home and the office complex is, just to the east of Walgreens and west of Ingalls. And that area is currently mixed-use neighborhood, and we're showing that as office light industrial, which matches how the property is being used. So that's kind of an overview of all the map amendments proposed in Resolution 22-10. And if anybody, I do have quite a few people that have signed up to speak on this if you want to hear from them as well. But that's
just before you do that, can
Yep.
you go back to the existing, the current land use? Okay, so this area, Olympic Drive, north of Olympic Drive, was another one that we've changed. So we probably need to insert that into the resolution, that we're changing that from low-density residential to very low-density residential. Go back to the.
that's not in the study area, is it?
It's not in the study area, but we are changing it on this map. Do we need to?
Oh, I see. Yep.
Yeah, see you later.
Acknowledge that?
It's the only part that's missing, really, that we're not addressing.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we
Could
can.
add an N.
Yeah, if anybody has any
That's the existing.
questions or comments about that, we can. Yeah,
The previous slide, so we can mark that on our.
It's
Okay.
this.
Yeah, I see
stay
it.
right here.
Yeah.
Whoop. Wrong.
You talking about the Russell property?
Yeah.
Is that? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the Olympic.
Ted Russell.
Yeah, north of Olympic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is the Russell property.
And the, what's his name?
Well, we actually are changing the ones, all of that. The
All
Olympic,
of that, right?
the Olympic Drive is changing to very low because that's the
Those three
existing.
properties.
Be part of what we look at next time, although it's
I'm
on
going
this
to
map.
really struggle making these changes on the fly if we're thinking about doing this tonight, and
Yeah, it's not in
without
the
the proper
study
public
area.
notification of these property owners. We're saying, yeah, let's just
Well, those
include
are-
this into it.
They're built environment.
Well, they are a built environment, but some of them are large enough acreage they could be developed in the future. I guess I'm going to struggle making some of these, like what you're talking about, the Russell property. I mean, I don't see it being developed anytime soon, but it could be. And I think it's unfair for us to shoehorn this in and say, oh yeah, by the way, we want to do that one too. So
Then let me propose this, because this is maybe the end, but the end could be, the Olympic Drive is built out, and it is not designated accurately. It needs to be designated accurately on the map. So change that to N, and because we've changed it on the map, it is very low density, And since we've changed it on this map, it's not like the Olympic Drive people are going to come out and say, hey, I want to re-subdivide my lot.
And again, it's
Like I
just
say,
a
it's not a
it's
zoning
not
map.
what there's not any requirements associated with
Well,
this.
I respect that. We call it a vision document. And, however, and I've been a part of this planning commission for, I don't know, eight or 10 years. And a lot of us, and sometimes even yours truly, we hold this document as the Holy Grail. And that's not necessarily when we created this document in 2012, that's not necessarily our intention. It's just a vision document. It's our dream.
That's right.
And some of these changes give me a lot of heartburn about rights that we could be potentially taking away from folks. The other thing that I'm going to struggle with this is that we are taking already expensive housing stock in the town of Farragut, and we are making it more expensive with these changes by forcing people to have larger lots. And so, and one of the directives, one of the philosophies, one of the objectives in our land use plan is to create diversified housing stock. We've got a lot of single family housing stock. Obviously, I know we've got a lot of multifamily. I think there's a lot of opportunities for attached single family. But personally, I'd like for my kids someday when they grow up to be able to afford to live in the town of Farragut. And making changes like this, I don't think it's ever going to happen. So I know we've got some folks that would like to speak tonight. I'm sure there's a lot of other commissioners that would like to be heard. But I'm struggling with this.
I'll make a statement, and then we'll move on to listening to the public. We have done 4 corridor studies. This is the 4th corridor study. Every corridor study, we've had the residents come in. They write on. They tell us this is our vision. This is what we'd like, and we adopt those changes. These residents are entitled to the same opportunity to say, hey, this is what our vision is. We have zoning. The zoning is what it is. And they are entitled to come in and have a vision. That's what the community was built on. And I understand your concerns, but the community was built on having community input. So
I love the outreach, and I love the input. However, when you've got folks that already have their neighborhood lot and their house, and then they're telling other folks, well, guess what? Your lot over there now has to be over an acre. Which is great. Everybody would love to have an over an acre lot. Well, maybe people that don't want to mow their yard don't want over an acre, but generally speaking, it's a utopia to think about how great it would be for everybody to have these giant lots. But the reality is giant lots are not affordable. Obviously, everybody would like to have, if they got a little lot, they'd love to have a giant lot back up to them because, they got one neighbor instead of 3 neighbors. But I think that this really warrants a lot of further discussion. I'd like to hear some folks that are here tonight that would like to speak and hear other commissioners. Again, I really am concerned about making changes to this document. If it's the pleasure of this commission to try to pass this thing tonight, making changes on the fly without the proper public notification. But at any rate, I'll yield the floor.
You ready for the speakers, or do you want to?
I just want to emphasize this is a vision. It's not the zoning. The zoning is a legal part of it, and whoever has the property can come in at any time they want to and ask for the zoning changes to be done.
Yes, ma'am, they can, but every single time one of those applicants come to us, all of us commissioners go to our land use plan and go, okay, is it compatible with the land use plan? Is it consistent with the land use plan? And I'm saying all of us, I assume it was a guiding document. That was the desire and the intent of that document. We have held that document a lot higher than just being a vision document.
Some
I
of you
can
have.
speak for myself.
Yeah.
I have not done that.
No, me
I
either.
look at it as going back and looking at what was kind of the vision. That's not an absolute. The zoning is, and the zoning request and a formal request on that basis has to stand on those merits.
Well, Mark was talking about using this to clean up.
Yeah.
I think from, if you look at the Olympic Drive area, the houses, that is built out. I mean, that cannot be subdivided any more than what it is. And that is, if you look at the coloration, very low density. what's above it, and you're talking about the Russell lot and the two other lots above that, are actually open space cluster residential. I think that's probably pretty correct.
That's rural residential. It's not open space cluster.
Yeah, just sometimes it's hard to read the color. The colors are tough.
Not R10SR.
It's residential.
Well, yeah, it's still residential, yeah, rural residential. But
Residential.
I don't think that that's land used, in my opinion. Yes, from the Olympic Drive, all that down there I think probably it is.
Yeah.
Hear from the public now.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's, you want the chairman?
Go.
Okay. The first speaker I have is John Wright, and then after John, John Holtzreger. Remember, you got 5 minutes, so.
John Wright, 412 Cedar Bluff Road, 37923. Mark, I'll be quick. The data that you collected at the public input workshops with the photos and everything, is that available? Can we see that?
Yeah, everything that we used is public information.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have it tonight, though?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I don't have it tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that all you wanted, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay.
After John Holtzreger is Doug Horn.
John Holstrager, 345 Bernie Circle, Farragut. Thank you for the time you devoted to doing these workshops. It's been really great for us to be able to come in and tell you as a group, what our vision is for that area. I support the outcomes that those workshops produced and what you're proposing here tonight. My rationale goes something like this. FMPC and BOMA both routinely have to struggle with decisions that are the consequences of our fantastic growth and what we've created in Farragut, and you take that seriously. And I hear each of you contributing and struggling with some of the ways that we have to decide these things. And just this evening, I heard some real passion coming from people about plans that we're considering putting together for the future of the town, and there's a lot of resistance to some of those things, and those passionate, resistant hearts, I think, are responding to what we've seen in Farragut as growth and the good things that this body and BOMA is bringing about, but it always comes with a price. So, given the town's growth, especially to the west of Farragut, I think we need to be really choiceful about what we do with remaining vacant parcels of land like we have here, because, we kind of only get one shot at that. We can put an apartment building there, or we can put 2.4 densities, units per acre, or we can put, the 1 acre lots that Noah talked about. And I think to allow vacant land anywhere in Farragut to continue to densify and to creep up over time, I think just causes us to have more of the problems that we're responding to tonight: more traffic, more growth, more congestion. My wife reminds me sometime when I have an argument with her. I know none of you ever argue with your spouses, but she'll say, when you get yourself in a hole, you ought to stop digging. And as a community, we have dug ourselves into a hole with density, and now there's like nowhere to turn because we have so little open space. And so my plea, my request is that this body really very choicefully consider what we do with those open parcels. I hear and respect what Mr. Myers said about those 1 acre lots, but that is kind of what Farragut has become. It's become a bit of an enclave, and it's different than what we see in other communities developing. And yes, they are more expensive, but that's not the whole of Farragut, because we have opportunity for other people to build and to live and enjoy, maybe smaller lot sizes. So I'd encourage you to vote and approve this tonight. We've been back and forth on this many, many times. We've come to town hall many times to do workshops, and I would really hope that we can make a decision on this tonight. Thanks, folks.
Okay, we have Doug Horn, and then after him is Michael Wilson.
Thank you. Doug Horn, 12103 South Fox Den. I've been a resident in Farragut and graduated from Farragut High School in 1963, and I've done a lot of things in Farragut. We brought a lot of retail customers in. I know the chair lady would love a new retail customer on Eddie Ford's property, which we agree with that. But we brought a lot of retail sales in for Farragut, and we started a newspaper. We've been very good citizens, we believe. We've been very focused on reflecting the tenor of this town and all the stories about the town's people and the athletic programs and schools. And so we're invested in this town. This property that we have 50 acres that's in this study. And my daughter Susan and my 2 grandchildren, this is their property. They are very hopeful that this property would not be reduced in value by this land use plan. Mr. Myers is exactly right. Like we said the last time we were here, we don't want to kid ourselves. The land use plan is relied on by this commission. If we come in for a zoning change, you look at the land use plan, and you should. We understand that. We've developed in 28 or 9 states in the country, and they always look at land use plan. So we can't say that's just a guide. I could start quoting some other examples in this town where the guide was used the opposite direction. But this time, on zoning, you always go to the guide. Mayor McGill, Ralph McGill, came to us because we'd done a lot for this town. We're proud of the influence and the progress we've made in this town. We've done a lot of good work in this town. We believe I can quote Bible and verse on that. And Ralph McGill came to me and he said, Doug, you've done a lot of good things. What is the density, you the landowner that bought the property with sweat equity 40-some years ago, what do you think should be on this land, the density? And we agreed 6 to 12 per acre. That's what the 2012 land use plan called for. Then it was changed and reduced the value of our property in 2018 to 6 to 8. Then we proposed a project at 6 to 8 units per acre where we would widen Boring Road at our expense, not the town. We would pay for the Boring Road widening, probably $1,500,000. There are other development in this town where the town has paid for widenings. We didn't ask for the town to pay for it. Now we come up with this where certainly citizens would like to not have any development nearby. We admire Baldwin Park. We love the Baldwin Park people, and naturally they would like for this to stay a very low density. But this is more than just Baldwin Park. This is the landowner that owns the property for 45 years, our family, my daughter, 2 grandchildren, my wife. And for us to change the land use plan to go to like 1 acre lots is absolute nuts. And the property east of us, Mr. Gwynn over here, and the Borings also will be affected by this. That their land will be greater than 1 acre lots for this plan. I don't know who commented on the land use plan proposal, but it's mainly people that are trying to slow down anything right around them. I've said this before at other meetings. I remember when Mr. Stooksbury sold the 16 or 17 acres on Boring Road, and we missed the bid by $25,000. Saddlebrook bought it, and there are a lot of people who didn't want Baldwin Park there. A lot of people on Boring Road didn't want Baldwin Park there either. And we'll talk about another proposal later about Mr. Ford's property, where people don't like something good to happen right beside them. But we proposed to widen Boring Road if we kept our land use plan that had been in effect from 2012, 6 to 12, 2008, 6 to 8. So
You got there's 30 seconds.
we know, and you know, as I said the last meeting, we're kidding ourselves. If somebody says the land use plan is something that's just a guide, no, it isn't. If we come in and ask for zoning to reflect the land use plan, we'd be turned down. And everybody on this commission, I think most of the commission knows that. So we want to be treated fairly. We want you to realize we're long-term citizens of this town. We believe we've done our part in this town in many ways. So I think you need to remember that.
Next is Michael Wilson, and after him is Sam Gwynn.
Good evening, Michael Wilson, 412 Eisenhower Street, Farragut, Tennessee. I've stood before you many a times, and I want to comment on first what Commissioner Myers was kind of discussing. I view the comprehensive land use plan as the agreement that was signed between the town government and the citizens of this community on how this town would be developed. It was an agreement between the residents that participated and the folks that ran the town at the time in 2012. That's why there's a requirement for major changes to go back in front of the community, just like the ones that are proposed tonight have been. So I think it's more than just a guide. I think it's an agreement between the citizens and those that represent us. With that, I'd like to address the proposed changes specifically to areas F and I behind the old Ingalls. Changing this area to very low density and rural residential is not consistent with the transition policy in the comprehensive land use plan. The transition policy states that it is there, quote, to protect existing neighborhoods from incompatible new development and to encourage gradual transitions within a new development. The following guidelines should be applied. If density is different from the adjacent property as proposed, the transition should occur within the proposed development. This change to this policy is not impacted by the facts that this changes from mixed use, the old Ingalls changes from mixed use to commercial. Okay, that doesn't change this policy within the plan. So it's clear by looking at these diagrams, there's no proposed transition of density within this property. While the resolution advocates for placing very low density and rural residential next to a commercial development, the staff's comments for agenda items 6 and 7 include the potential incompatibility of commercial property being placed next to the surrounding low-density residential neighborhoods without proper transition. As the town states, quote, the very large scale of the building and its associated activities, such as frequent deliveries and trash pickup, could create adverse impacts to the Park Place and Glen Abbey subdivisions which abut the property. For these two agenda items, the town advocates for the placement of very low density next to commercial while cautioning about it in the next agenda item. That's not even logical. Some may argue that the open space in item E is a transition. A similar debate happened in 2015 and 16 regarding the previous rezoning at Ivy Farm. The FMPC recommended 150 feet of green space to serve as a transition between the proposed commercial and rural residential properties. That development never came to fruition, and subsequently the town corrected that decision with the appropriate transition that is currently being built. It seems clear the town has revisited that property and determined that open space is not an appropriate transition. In this case, the FMPC should amend PC 22-10 to ensure the appropriate transition occurs within the property by gradually decreasing density from medium density behind the old Ingalls to very low density in rural residential next to the existing residential properties to the north to provide them the proper protection. This would be consistent with the CLUP and the action taken on Ivy Farm. Not doing so is an arbitrary change that is inconsistent with the transition policy and undermines the comprehensive land use plan. Thank you.
And the last speaker was Sam Gwynn.
Hi, thank you all. Good evening. My name's Sam Gwynn. I reside at 330 Channing Drive. I'm also speaking tonight on behalf of my daughters, Brittany Moore and Dale Flanagan, who are here. I'm going to read this, or I don't want to get too emotional on what I say. I'm speaking tonight in reference to the resolution PC 22-10 on the amendments of the future land use map in the comprehensive land use plan, updated for portions of Boring Road. Our property, which I am the fifth and they are the sixth generation landowner of this, is Area J. As you will notice, it's surrounded all the way by Village Green and Fox Den and Country Manor. Our other property is bounded by my daughter's house, cousin's house, and other property right beside it. I first want to thank Mark for the time that he spent on engaging with residents to discuss not only the possible options, but the developments in these areas, but also the results of the workshops. Secondly, my reason for speaking tonight, I would like to ask the Planning Commissioner to consider leaving Area J as it currently is in the land use plan now, and changing the proposal and not changing it to the proposed as is. It is currently low-density residential, or 3 to 6 units per acre. The intent of this style is to protect existing low and very density subdivisions and neighborhoods, and is served by local streets. It also encourages a mixture of lot sizes and to add some diversity. The proposal is to lower the density to entire categories of rural residential, or 1 acre or lot. The intent of this style is to protect existing rural areas as a lifestyle, maintain open vistas, rural image of Farragut, and is typically associated with agriculture, including farming, livestock, nurseries, greenhouse, or can solely be residential. Rural designation will encourage clustering to preserve areas of active agriculture. I am encouraging you to grandfather this section into the 2012 land use plan and leave it as is, because we all know farming, livestock, and nurseries and the rural nature of Farragut is no longer in existence. To believe that it is fair and equitable treatment of how the land would be used is ignoring the state of our town and the location of the land. If ever developed, which it isn't happening, and it won't be in the foreseeable future. However, considering our current economy, the needs of our town, and are not representative of rural residential. We've heard in many meetings brought before the FMPC, moved to Knox County, moved to the county. If you don't want lights or to hear kids playing and so on, and believe that the last chunk of land that should be preserved in the county isn't equitable. I'm asking you tonight to please adjust the proposal for Area J and grandfather the section to match the surrounding areas. As you can see on this map, and I'd ask Mark to put the other map back up, this is what we're asking for, and you can see that is consistent with everything that is around us.
That's not.
That area.
Come in front of you
Well, it's higher.
and not use it as agricultural under Tennessee regulations. That would be able to consistent with the surrounding and connecting areas, which would not lead to. If you've got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Mr. Gwynn, just for clarity, what you're asking for is a higher density than what is the surrounding area. Village Green is R2.
I am asking for the same classification that it is right now, 1 to 3 houses per acre.
That's not what that is. That's 3 to 6.
That's 3 to
That
6.
bright yellow is 3 to 6. If you want it to stay, if you want it to be consistent with what's around it, it would be very low density, which is 2 to 4.
2 to 4 is fine. I mean, that's better than 1 to an acre. But I mean, you got to make it consistent. I mean, it's just not fair to take somebody's land that hasn't developed it, and it will be the largest portion of land in the city of Farragut to not be developed if the Ford property is developed.
And to be fair, last meeting, I did state that I thought that was something that
Yeah.
we should probably consider.
Yeah, I did
that
too.
It shouldn't be rural residential, that it should probably be designated very low
Very low
residential to
density.
be consistent with Village Green. which is
Yeah,
what I had
we
suggested.
talked about that last time, Sam, and because
Well,
I
it's
too.
not on this map, and if
Yeah,
you
I
had to
understand.
adopt it
No, I
tonight,
understand.
I don't think that's why I'm asking for it to be grandfathered in.
I don't think I mean, it's not about grandfather. I think it's about doing what's right. I think what has happened here is a popularity contest. We've got a group of folks that got excited who are residents in the immediate area, and they said, let's come up with the biggest utopian area that we can come up with. Let's make everybody have these giant lots. even though they may live on a fifth of an acre. And I am so disappointed in the direction that we are going with this. It is not fair, and it is not consistent, and it's not just you, Sam. I mean, there's other properties that are involved, and I don't have any idea who overs on H. But to tell that guy, well, even though you've got these little half-acre lots across the street, you've got to now build 1 acre lots. I understand this is what everybody got excited about who participated in the workshops. But the people that participate in the workshops are the people that don't want anything in their backyard other than a big field.
I will say this, in defense of the residents in Baldwin Park. They've been through the frickin' ringer for years. It started with Smith Road Apartments, and then there were more apartments proposed behind Ingalls, and then there were more apartments proposed behind Ingalls, and they're exhausted. So if you're seeing a knee-jerk reaction, that's what it is. What they're asking for is that the property be designated how it is to align with how it is currently zoned. Now, Baldwin Park is R3, and I've explained if Mr. Horn came in and said, I want R3 for G and F, that would make complete sense to me. And I think that's a legitimate land use, R3. But they've been dealing with densities far beyond what they believe to be in the best interests of that area. And so this is their reaction, is we want to keep this single-family residential. I agree with Mr. Gwynn and I made that point last time, that doesn't make any sense. My concern, and you guys should be aware of this, is anything more than 30 units, and this is, you guys said you're not going to develop for a long time.
Not planning on development, period. My daughters might, when they do it sometime, but I don't plan. I'm 76 years old. I'm sure as heck not going to get in the development business.
But they should be aware that with this size of this property, more than 30 units, you're going to need a secondary access. So that's I think that was what the initial thought was, leave it rural residential because you're going to need more than secondary access. But that's a problem down the road. That
Sam has road frontage on 2 different right-of-ways.
Yes.
So Sam's got the secondary access covered
but
right now.
it would have to come up Boring Lane.
Oh, yeah, just like we dealt with the thing in Fox Inn.
No, it won't come up Boring Lane. That is not, it can't come up Boring Lane.
No, he's got
That's
West Heritage
private.
in Chowning. He owns property on West Heritage in Chowning.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. For all the holly trees.
That's right.
It's always been, so.
So I don't have an issue with changing that area to reflect what the existing residential is around it. I mean, that's a decision for everyone to make, but.
Now keep in mind, this map this is really just based on the predominant input that we received from the people that showed up to provide input. I mean, I brought up Sam's property last time and I'm like Louise, I thought that needed to probably be relooked at. But really, honestly, the predominant feedback that we received really is what's mapped there on the draft map.
And how many of those people
I
live
understand,
in a lot that is a half acre or less or in an apartment? Because I attended all 4 of those meetings.
And the gentleman that lives on H intends on keeping that a large lot.
Well, all that can change, but yeah,
Obviously, but
yeah.
that's.
But Mike,
He bought it to build one house on.
Well, and that's great, but I mean, and Mike Wilson and I have not always agreed over the years, but we are absolutely in alignment tonight. This land use plan, we have held it up as a very important document. You know, I called it the Holy Grail document. Maybe some of you didn't respect it as much as that. Maybe respect's not the right word. But every decision, especially zoning decisions, that this body has made since we adopted that document, we look at the land use plan. And so when we're saying, oh, this is just a guide, what we're talking about tonight is not just a guide. This is a big deal. This takes away his rights. Takes away his rights.
If you change it.
You can change it, but it's a whole process to come back.
R1. That's what he has a right to. R1 and R2.
Yeah, but I'm talking about what's there today in the land use plan. We're changing the land use plan. When they come back to us, we're going to say, oh, it's not consistent with the land use plan, you're denied.
But But this
You're
allows
making-
for
you're
R1,
make-
R2, or R3, I'm sorry.
You're making blanket statements, and I categorically disagree with you characterizing my personal view on this as being all of us think the same way. It's not monolithic, and it's never been monolithic. Okay? The land use plan is very much a guide. We've had instances, and you know it as well as I do. I know Doug knows it, and others know. We've gone back and changed the land use plan because somebody came in with a proposal that made sense. I mean, it's a vision. You can't look out 10 years and say that's what it's got to be regardless. That's why it's a living document.
But it's rare that we change the land use plan.
But the other problem is, you have a major landowner. Well, Sam goes to the workshop. Well, he's one voice, but hell, if you weigh his vote versus the others, he ought to have the guy that owns the property ought to have a little bit more sway on what to do with the land use map and the influence on the zoning and what to do with the property.
Amen. That's right.
Ed and I have both been on the planning commission for several years, more so than anybody else on here. And I will say prior to this, the group that came in to be the consultants and develop the comprehensive land use plan, I'd never heard of a comprehensive land use plan. I think the town had to have one because it was a state requirement. Is that right, Mark?
A plan is. It doesn't
Well,
have to be.
Plan.
We just had a really old plan. It was just really outdated.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
a plan went back to like
wasn't anything-
1980.
Yeah.
Well, it was
And so we needed a brand new plan that
we
incorporated a lot of
good-
new principles.
We had a good policy statement
we
plan.
had a policy statement.
That was adopted in
And that was
2001.
updated.
Yeah.
As far as a comprehensive land use plan, I'd never heard of that until this group from Colorado comes in to do the consulting for,
Which we created in 2012.
yeah, in 2012. So if somebody comes in now and asks for a zoning change, we're going to look at this, what they want to do there, what the surrounding is. There's a lot of factors, not just what's on this piece of paper. So I want everybody to understand that. You could come in and want to put an amusement park there and everybody would be thrilled, maybe. And we would probably go with that.
But Rita, in reality, if we come in for a zoning change, we know that you're going to say, what does the land use plan say? That's what every state we've ever developed in, that's what they say. So you'll say the same thing. But what Sam's saying, what I'm saying, if we adopt this plan, it kills the value of our land. It's taking value. It's confiscation without compensation. It's probably, that's what it is. It's not tax without representation. It's confiscation without compensation. That's what I call it. And it's hurting our children, our grandchildren. Sam and I are probably too old to develop it all, perhaps anyway. And remember, I also had volunteered not to ask the town for the money to widen Boring Road, but we were going to widen Boring Road as long as we keep our 6 to 8 units per acre, which used to be 6 to 12. So to me, that's certainly a variable that you need to factor in. You don't need to make the changes on this plan that you have in front of you. It was like Mark said, it's just a few people that are real close by that certainly would like to see minimal density. And like I said, when Mr. Stooksbury, Mary Margaret and Sheila Stooksbury sold that land at Baldwin Park, so there's a lot of good people on Baldwin Park, but there's a lot of people around Boring Road didn't want that either. I can name family names. They didn't want that property developed either. So growth happens. In Farragut, Farragut's a dynamic growth town.
I'm just going to ask you to consider what I said, take it back to what it was, please, and give us a resolution, or just change it and put it back what it was.
Well, we don't have to put it back because we haven't changed it yet.
Well,
That's
just
right.
leave
But
it
right.
alone.
You know, something,
Admit it.
Leave well enough alone, as Mama says.
something else I'd like to bring up that Mike Wilson brought up is the buffer. You know, for a lot of years, this town, we loved buffers. Boy, we put buffers all over the place. And then when we did the land use plan, we said, you know what, there's a better way than just force feeding these buffers. And it's called transitional zoning or feathering of zoning. And so here we are, we're going back and putting a buffer in here that we are actually calling we call it, we just call it open space.
Zone buffer.
And then, well, we've got a couple areas. We've got one behind Ingalls, and we've got the one in front of NHC,
Zone buffer.
and it is Zone B1 buffer.
Both of them all of them are zone buffer.
What my thought is, if we're trying to create this guiding document or a dream document or a vision document, but we're not following the basic principles of the land use plan, and that's the transitional zoning or the feathering of zoning.
Well, even if you want to do transitional zoning, first off, Baldwood Park is 2.34 units per acre. How you go from 2.34 units an acre to, if we keep medium density, 6 to 8 units per acre, I don't see how you do that in that limited space. That buffer is zoned buffer, and it's a berm, and it's heavily treed, and it protects those neighborhoods back there from the noise of Kingston Pike. It blocks the view of the back of Ingalls. It serves a purpose, and with that buffer, I'm not sure that you need a transition. You've got this huge 95-foot deep buffer that has treed over the years. It's existed there a long time. You take that buffer out, now you're mowing it down, now you're looking at the back of a
Well, what's kind of interesting is, yes, we all embrace these buffers, and yes, there's a mature buffer with a berm and a bunch of pine trees. I'm not advocating go tear down the buffer. I guess what I'm saying is we have other principles like connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, vehicular connectivity, where we actually want the neighborhoods, if they have commercial that's nearby, we want them to have the ability with good design to interface with those neighborhoods. And if you've got a big berm, you're not going to be able to interface any kind of connectivity with that. And so all of a sudden, I guess what we're doing is we're saying, all right, we're putting it on the land use plan as a buffer, and so therefore we're going to definitely eliminate vehicular connectivity. You could probably put a walking trail, through the berm or over the berm, or put a tunnel through the berm. But what my thought is I just don't understand why we can arbitrarily take some of the great things that we adopted in the land use plan, even though the Board of Mayor and Aldermen didn't necessarily adopt it, but as a planning commission, am I using the right word, adopt? Because I know we got educated on this about 10 years ago, specifically with the land use plan. But nevertheless, it's our guiding document. So we're taking some of the things that we like and some of the things we don't like, and we're just kind of being arbitrary of how we implement those philosophies. And I feel like that, again, what happened here is just a popularity contest. We said, let's just do it this way, irrespective of what good design and good planning is.
May I make a comment about the transition, please? I just want to say that, Vice Mayor Pavlin and I talked about this after the first Ivy Farm vote. I've spoken with others. I actually objected in that meeting to using that green space as a buffer, because that's not what our plan says. Our plan doesn't say green space or open space as a buffer. It says we transition densities to protect the existing neighborhoods. You need to protect the property that's going to go on this neighborhood behind a commercial building. It's really nice that there's trees there, but let me ask all the folks that are going to be up here for these next two items. Is that green space going to now be a buffer between the commercial property that's proposed on Ford's land, and Ivy Farm or Park Place? Are we going to apply the same standards to that development as what we're going to apply here? And that's why I believe this plan is critical to how you make decisions. I don't think you can just say arbitrarily, buffer works here. Arbitrarily on this property, no, you have to have transition from this density to this density to this density. That's not consistency, and it undermines the plan, and quite honestly, it undermines your credibility as a planning commission, the BOMA's credibility as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Be consistent with how this is applied.
Mr. Wilson, I'm happy to respond to that. There's this thing where people say, okay, there's your 4 squares, and this is the policy, and it has to apply to every 4 squares. Every 4 squares. It still all applies. And that's not what the transition policy is about. The transition policy is about taking what the existing environment is, looking at that existing environment, and transitioning from here. The existing environment here is the fact that we have a 90-foot deep strip of land that is zoned buffer. It is zoned that. That's its use. It is zoned as a buffer. It's long been zoned as a buffer. B1 is its zoning. To now say, okay, we're going to do transition policy and take that buffer out is not serving the residents behind there any purpose because the fact is it's a berm and it's treed. That needs to be thought about. That needs to be considered in our land use plan. If it was not just open space and you're still looking at the back of a grocery store, well then, yeah, then you want to start talking about transition. But when you're talking about a heavily treed, something
Sure.
that grew in, you have to, that's a consideration. In that.
And let me clarify my comments. I'm not advocating removing the buffer or removing the tree line. All I'm saying is that tree line and that berm don't flex or don't transition density. Our plan says that we transition density to protect existing neighborhoods, and we transition density within the property from commercial uses to higher density residential to lower density residential. Maybe it's not medium. I quite honestly think you could put a street or two of townhomes or connected homes at 4 units an acre, 5 units an acre behind there, and then put single lot homes, small lot homes like Baldwin Park behind those, next to Baldwin Park and going back to the Boring Farm area to the north. I think that could be done. I'm sure Mr. Horn may have a proposal sitting in his pocket right now where he's ready to do something like that. And that's what I'm saying. Be consistent with how this is applied. Because I'm telling you folks, if you're going to arbitrarily apply a standard here, but then when we talk about the next two items, you don't apply that same standard, then how are we treating anybody fair and equitably? And I appreciate the comments by the other landowner that don't do this to me. And I appreciate the fact that Vice Mayor Pavlin and Mark recognized that in the last meeting, because I thought that's maybe what the landowner wanted and he requested, but obviously it's not. All I'm saying is treat everybody the same. Treat everybody equitably. If you're going to have a transition policy that allows a buffer, amend the plan and say green space, open space buffer at certain distance is a transition. It qualifies. Put it in the plan so everybody that comes up here and speaks in front of you understands what the rules are regardless of which property we're talking about. And that's all I'm asking for, is the consistency in the application of the plan. And I think that's fair because, like I said, this was an agreement between the folks that ran the town at the time and everybody who lived in this town. And I think you ought to honor that agreement and not simply use it here, use it there, the way that you see fit for a particular property. And if we need to change it and add a buffer, we should have a discussion and put it in the plan. Thank you.
And I will add on to what Mr. Wilson's talking about with transition. When you look at G, on the current map, you've got Baldwin Park, which is 2.34 units per acre, which should not be bright yellow, it should be light yellow. It's designated inaccurately. So you've got your 2.34 units per acre, and Waverly Court's at something like 4.5 units per acre. And then you put medium density in the middle of that. That makes no sense. It makes no sense from a development point of view to go from 4.5 to 6 to 8 to 2.34. So I look at that part particularly, and that's kind of what the driving was looking, okay, that makes no sense. If you're looking at Baldwin Park and you want to apply transitions, the area that's F, the area that's right next to it should be very low density residential and potentially moving up to the bright yellow behind the buffer, the strip that's B, but it under no circumstances should be medium density. The rest of that, I and J, should be very low density residential. That's what the existing environment is around it. That's what makes sense. That's what makes sense in a development perspective in that area.
Louise, if that makes sense, then why is it proposed as rural residential? How did they even get to this point?
Because that's what the residents asked for. If we want to, that's what we're having a conversation about. The residents said, hey, when you're looking at Boring Road and that part of Boring Road, it makes all the sense in the world when you go down there. It's R1, it's zoned R1. Mr. Horn has a right to develop it as R1. That is his right. But if the community, what the community is saying is, if you're inclined to do large lots, this would be a great place to do an estate-sized lot because that area just shouts for it. But you still have a right to develop out as R1. So I think that's what the thinking was when they were looking at that particular corridor. So
I think Mr. Gwynn, he was at all the workshops, And primarily he listened, but tonight he spoke, and he didn't really ask for his to be changed. He wasn't one of the ones that asked to have a change. And tonight he's asking to leave it be.
But
And-
leaving it be is 3 to 6 units per acre.
Well, that's,
You cannot put townhomes in the middle of a low-density residential. That's just so incompatible. I disagree with
Be
that.
okay if you made
Yeah, I
it
think
compatible with
he-
Village Green.
Yeah, the 2 to 4
Yeah.
units per acre was.
yeah, he spoke
that was
tonight saying
very low
that-
density, yeah.
Well, we need to be clear on that, because right now it's designated 3 to 6 units per acre, which is R4. When all he wants is, he's stating that he'd like it to be consistent with Village Green.
yeah.
2 to 4.
2 to 4.
Oh, we told him 2 to 4. I thought that's what you said.
Yes.
2 to 4 is fine.
Yeah, 2 to 4 was okay.
And on this buffer and this transition thing, 82, whenever the buffer was, I think if I remember correctly, that's when it was put in. Well, in 2012, whenever the land use plan was done, then the buzzword then was transition. And that's what we have looked at since.
Well, then-
But, wait a minute.
Sorry.
When you get to looking at E, okay, it's just sit there, grown up. There's been no plans for it. So it's grown like what it's grown. You look at F and all the rest of that up through there. Part of it's been bush hog, part of it's not. So to whether it's 95 feet or ever how many feet it is, it's up on the hill there above the grocery store. Like somebody, I think Mr. Wilson may have said, you could do something transitional there, okay, and then move on to whatever is in between.
You mean leave the buffer there and do a transition zone?
Well, you can call it whatever you want to, but right now it's called a buffer.
Well, here, just so, can you go back to the original map? So the original map, they thought the Ingalls would come down, and that would all become one integrated, the buffer was going to come out, because it was going to be one integrated,
And that's not where we're at.
yeah, mixed use. So once you realize Ingalls is staying commercial, what's the use in taking that buffer out? Medium density doesn't quite make sense there anymore. When you have this this natural protection right there, you utilize it. It is protecting the residential areas all behind there. You're not hearing as much noise off of Kingston Pike, and certainly not dealing with the Ingalls, any noises you're hearing from Ingalls. So I look at G and I look at F the same way. G, part of it needs to be yellow, the light yellow, and part of it could be the bright yellow. And the same could be said for F. The south part could be bright yellow, and the northern part could be light yellow. And then you get your transitions in there, and you get the idea that, hey, we're looking at transitions, but you still have to understand you can't go from 2.34 units an acre to 6 units an acre. 6 to 8 units an acre. That doesn't make sense even from a transitional point of view. That's kind of where I am.
Well, it'd be hard to do something with G and follow anything we're doing, as far as if you're looking at the logic of it.
You could put R4 on one side and R3 on the other. I don't.
Yeah.
Or I know that this is lower density, but R10 SMR would be a mix of townhomes on one side and single-family detached on the other.
Well, right now nobody's brought anything to us to look at. We're just talking about land use. So
Yeah.
I think we probably ought to look at it in a little bit more logical way.
Go ahead.
I was at the all of the workshops, and I think that's one of the best things that the town of Farragut does is to have workshops like that, to have meetings like this, to get community input. But anybody that was at those meetings understands 95% of the people that were there are homeowners who don't want any density changes or any development to come in, really. And so I value community input, and I know you do, Mark. But that can't be the thing that drives everything. I think if you went out into the community and asked the average Farragut citizen if they think it's fair to devalue a couple of guys' properties dramatically, is that fair and equitable? And I think most people in the community not just the local homeowners, not just the nearby homeowners, but most people in the community would not think that that's fair. Thank you.
When we did the land use plan in 2012, we did a ton of outreach to the entire community, and we actually had a pretty good response. We did it over multiple times, really over about 12 to 18 months. And we had a lot of folks, citizens from every boundary of the town of Farragut participate. And that's what developed the land use plan. And one of the things that we actually heard from the community, it wasn't unanimous, but it was the majority of the community, is they actually wanted to see density in areas like this to create other types of housing, whether it was diversified types of housing or more affordable housing. Therefore, that's how the land use plan in 2012 created the map that had some densities going up to 6 to 8 units an acre. Some of them went up to 12 units an acre. We determined, after there was a lot of public outcry and frustration with some of the apartments, we determined, okay, maybe's enough. And so we changed the density to maximize the density to 8. But when we did this outreach to a community as a whole, not just the Boring Road folks or the Watt Road folks or the folks in Fox Den that we talked to tonight, with the map was derived because of what the whole community said, not just what a few people said. And so I'm really struggling with all of a sudden now it's back to the popularity contest. I'm not saying there doesn't need to be made some changes. I'm okay with the changes, but the buffer, I don't see. The buffer is already zoned B1 in the zoning ordinance, and we're adopting a land use plan amendment that now has a buffer which completely contradicts the philosophies in the land use plan. There is no way anybody could go in and tear down those berms and those trees without a change to the zoning ordinance, which requires this body and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And so, again, we're doing things in here just to play favorites, and I just don't understand it. I understand it. I just don't agree with it.
Holiday, may I ask a process question?
John, let's get you up on the mic.
Yeah.
So my process question is, we've had a number of workshops to solicit community input, and it wasn't just people on Boring Road. It was open to anyone who wanted to come. And in fact, at least 20 subdivisions were invited to that. So it's not just a group of us in Baldwin Park. So if that's our process, and we've presented you with citizen input about what the community wants, why would it not be acceptable to vote on that tonight? My next process question is, if you decide not to vote on that, then what process are we going to use? Are we going to turn it around and say, MPC really owns the responsibility to put this together in a logical way using the rules that we have as the town of Farragut, and then bring that back to us and say, well, what do you think of this? Is that a possibility? Because most of us in Baldwin Park, most of us on Boring Road, most of us in the town don't know the fine details of the rules. If you could bring us a plan, would that be acceptable? That we could go yes or no or maybe? Or is
And I'll add on to Mr. Holtz-Rager's. This is, we all know that this plan is complicated. The comprehensive land use plan is complicated. The land use map is complicated. It's people can confuse between zoning and land use designations, and then what are the land use designations? We've redefined them. I think there's a lot more people educated on our land use plan than certainly what 2012. But it's been something that the community came in, and it wasn't just this area. There were residents from all over the community came in and gave their input on what they wanted to see here. If they had done this in 2012, would we have listened to them? If they do, if everyone in this area knew, hey, they're making this plan, well, we'd like to see it. We'd like to see it generally designated in the same type of development that we have now. Would we have listened to them? That's the question, because we decided, hey, this is an idea. We can put mixed use here. And what if everybody that was living there realized, no, I don't want that? Did they even understand that this was happening? So Mr. Gwynn is asking for us to put his consistent with the surrounding development, which is 2 to 4 units per acre. He's zoned for R1. The properties here, Mr. Horn's properties, are zoned R1. They could be made consistent, or we could add in some LDR. But if you're going to work with transitions, you have to acknowledge that Baldwin Park is 2.34 units per acre. It is very low density, and a transition from there requires some thought about caring for the fact that that's low density residential there. So
I would just summarize and say we've given you our input 2 or 3 times over the span of a year. You've asked for it. We've given it to you. If you don't want to make a decision, that's your choice. But if you're not going to use that process, tell us what process you'd like to use.
I'd like to make a comment, Doug, before you start.
All right, yeah, too late.
I think what I've heard here is that the issue, that we've kind of resolved all the issues except F, G, and I. I think we've agreed on J. I think we kind of agree that that's okay to make that low. So we're really talking about F, G, and I. And so I guess, Doug, as you're up at the microphone, what could you accept as a compromise here between the residents and what the position that the commission is in right now and what you would like for your property? Let me just start there.
Okay, thank you for asking that. What I wanted to mention to John was that when Baldwin Park was developed, most everyone on Boring Road, they didn't want any development there. You know, the Borings, the Smiths, the Horns, the Railings, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't want development there. So that's what happens when you have growth. People right in the next agenda item, we got some comments about that too. But I think, to answer your question, Mr. Green, you know, we'd like to leave it, kind of like Sam said, leave the density what we have now, given the fact if we develop the property in a growth in nice homes, lots that more people can come into Farragut, we said we would widen Boring Road. Now, we also have another assisted living that's going to come in. I think Mark knows about it. Assisted living from Roanoke, Virginia, wants to go right beside the current S1, east of S1. So we'll be bringing that one in too. So we have some other development proposed there. But I think Noah's right. You need a wider net to talk to more people, and also particularly the landowners. I think where you failed is talk to the landowners, because people that bought property, that have owned it for years, have family members involved, they need to be consulted more than you did. If you ask me about somebody else's property 3 or 4 properties away, I might say, I don't want anything there, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, but I don't have my sweat equity in it, my family history in it. I think you need to, like Ralph McGill in 2011-12, he came and talked to people directly. What do you that are active citizens of this town want on your property that you paid for with borrowed money and hard work? And I think that's what you need to do. Throw a wider net out to people.
So you would not accept low density 3 to 6 units per acre on F, G, and I?
Mr. Green, I can't. If the town would widen Boring Road and pay for it themselves, like you've had on some other roads in this town, then we could accept a lower density. But if we're widening Boring Road, then no, we'd like to keep 6 to 8. We can't make any money on 3 to 4 units per acre. But Boring Road needs to be widened, and we all know that.
3 to 6.
3 to 6, low density, 3 to 6 units per acre. This is kind of like a compromise between what you've got now and what's on there now. I'm trying to reach a resolution here.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. 3 to 6. Now we may not be able to widen Boring Road, but 3 to 6 on both G, F, and I, that'd work.
So 6 would be okay, and you would not be able to widen to help us widen.
I wouldn't promise that I could widen Boring Road if we go 3 to 6. Maybe we could if we got 6. If we got 6 per acre.
I have a question. Why are you even discussing that when you said you're going to bring in another assisted living?
That's over on the blue.
Yeah, assisted living,
okay.
Just east of the current assisted living.
Okay.
It'll be civic institution.
So you'll still have the part there
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
F?
Yes, ma'am. We'll still have them. Piece left.
Okay.
I do have one other person that's asked to speak.
Let's
Paul-
get him.
Paul Johnson.
I have a question, and it might be for either Louise or Mark, but isn't there some part of, I think it's either the land use plan or the future land use plan that talks about that even if it's projected to be that, the default is the minimum acreage?
Minimum.
So even though it's 6 to 8,
That's the
right,
policy.
the default would be
Range.
6.
Yeah, you get
Not
the low
8.
range of the density.
So
and
John's compromise of 3 to 6,
But 3 to 6 to me, does not belong on I because of the fact that your J is going to be very low density residential, so it's going to be light yellow. And Baldwin Park is light yellow. So
probably something like
I probably needs to just stay light yellow.
that right there could be low density residential.
I think what we're forgetting is with good design, you can feather the density. So you may have an overall 3 to 6 units an acre, and maybe the 6 units is down there near angles, and then you start feathering it back. But your overall density remains the same, your average density, but it's feathered towards the back. So I think we can still meet the concerns with I. And again, and this is not done at this stage. This is done at the concept plan and at the preliminary plat stage. And so we're getting into kind of micromanaging what somebody may or may not do. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the land use plan. If the land use plan was just not that big a deal and just kind of a guiding document, we wouldn't be all so darn concerned about exactly where the dividing line is. But we are concerned about it because we know what a big deal the document is.
My point is that whatever transition we're going to have, it should be to LDR, and be very careful about what you're doing on Boring Road, and that where I is, it doesn't make sense. None of that makes sense to be medium density.
Well, I mean, I think the transition could definitely, I think LDR makes sense when you're getting back to Boring Road because that's what's matching the other density over on Axton and maybe what would happen on Sam Gwynn's property at some point in the future.
But that's very low density residential, not low density residential. Low density residential is the bright yellow. That's 3 to 6 units per acre.
Okay. You were saying LDR, not VLDR.
Very low densities, 2 to 4, and that would be what Country Way and Village Green mostly is.
But I guess what I'm saying is part of the concept plan in a project this big, we're going to want a concept plan instead of going straight to preliminary plat. I mean, that's when we work on feathering the density. So their overall density, it might be the 3 to 6 units. Or it might even be 6 to 8 units an acre, but as they feather back, it needs to marry into whatever the adjacent density is up there off of Boring Road or Baldwin Park or Waverly Court. But I think just arbitrarily saying, well, this has got to be this one, this one's got to be this one. We're now putting these sharp lines in, and the consultants that we had back in 2012, they kind of warned us against that, about putting these sharp dividing lines in, trying to force feed things that the land use plan is not supposed to do. That's what we have the zoning ordinance for. Because those lines do matter. They're a meets and bounds description.
go ahead.
Paul Johnson, 344 Bernie Circle. First of all, Doug and Noah, I wasn't living in Baldwin Park in 2012 when this occurred. So I hadn't had a voice until this has happened, okay? I don't see why we should expect to have up to 6 units per acre in area G. It doesn't make sense. And area I, especially the northern part of area I don't see why it would even need to be up to 6 units per acre. Now, Mr. Horn said he's looking at bringing in something that he may want to be putting into the civic institutional thing in area F. So we can wait to see what he wants to propose for that. So I know I don't have the authority to say this, but I would suggest you folks leave G and I the way it is proposed here, and Doug's going to be coming in with something for F next month probably, as he says, and put area J to the low density that Mr. Gwynn wants. And I propose and let's move on and get some progress here tonight. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
It's up to you all what you want to take action on. It's not me.
Exactly what is it we're going to do now?
I and J makes sense
Presentation.
as very low density residential.
Yeah, I and J, and that's part of Mr. Horn's and Sam Gwynn's,
Makes
to
sense.
go to very low density residential instead of rural residential.
Instead of rural residential.
And that would match the predominant existing zoning that's around those areas. So that'd be two. Well, changing I and J from rural residential land use to very low density residential, that would match Village
2 to 4.
Village Green and Country Manor, Country Way, those areas.
Mark, would you go back to the land use plan that's in effect today? So you're saying we're changing it from a proposed plan to a new proposed plan, but what we're really doing is taking Mr. Horn's property, which is now medium density residential, 6 to 8 units an acre, and we're going to now drop it down to
2 to 4.
we're going to drop it down two bars on the chart to very low density residential properties. That's really what in effect what we're approving.
That's one way to look at it, but the zoning is going up.
Well, let's don't get into zoning. That's different. This is a land use plan, but
What we're talking about,
Existing land use.
I'm not talking about existing land use, but that's not what the future land use is. I'm talking about future. The future land use is our dream of what we want it to look like in the future.
Existing land use is agriculture.
A low 4.5 unit per acre Waverly Court, and then.
I'm not saying I would never support taking that kind of density and butting it up against those neighborhoods, but I think the overall density could be achieved and feather it back so the density matches when you get back to those neighborhoods. Same thing on Boring, Waverly Court, and Baldwin Park. But I think the overall density could still be maintained in the medium density. You might have very dense areas up near Ingalls, and then you feather it. And that's the whole purpose of the land use
The lower
plan.
end of medium density is 6 units an acre. That's not anywhere near. If you put 6 units an acre.
Louise, what you're forgetting, that doesn't mean that you're eligible to build 6 units in that pocket of the property. It's your overall density. It's kind of like the same density numbers we use for OSR. I mean, you might have one area, Bridgemore, that has big lots, and another area in Bridgemore that has little bitty lots. But it has all basically the same designation on the land use plan and the same zoning, and I think that's what we're forgetting. Just because you got medium density doesn't mean that this planning commission would ever say, yes, let's throw 6 to 8 units per acre right next to Baldwin Park. What we're talking about is overall average density, and that's what we're taking away from him.
Kind of like clustering. I mean, when you talk about that, if you've got a sinkhole somewhere or a real severe topo change, you're not going to build there. You're going to cluster around it. I mean, the site plan could cluster.
Exactly.
can't do that under the current zone because it's R1. It's not.
And that's why we have concept.
That's why you have zoning and go through.
There could be a
concept plans and preliminary plats, and we have good design that comes before this commission, and we talk about these things.
Get a land use plan that expresses things realistically, and this is anything. I don't support anything being medium density on this portion here. It's low density residential in its feel and its current use. And that is what the residents are asking for us to stay with. They came in, they added, we're staying consistent. We're going to move these rural residential areas up to very low density residential, which is consistent with how they're currently zoned and allows for the idea of moving to R2 or R3. And then if we want to look at this, the portion just north of Ingalls as LDR and just west of or east of Waverly Court as LDR, that seems to me to express some transitions, but still respecting the fact that this is a single-family residential area. And that's what it is.
Louise, what concerns me is when we adopted this plan and we made some subsequent changes to this plan, you supported medium density then. And I guess what we're forgetting is we're trying to do a shotgun approach here to something that when we look at it on a concept plan and we have the ability to transition the density, that's when you're able to achieve the objectives. I think the objectives you're trying to achieve is to protect the homeowners. And when they see this plan, they automatically think 6 to 8 units in my backyard. That is not, well, I guess I can't say what future planning commissions would approve, but that's not what I believe in my heart this planning commission would approve today right up against Baldwin Park. And so what we're doing is we're taking a wholesale approach. Well, let's just fix it so this will never come up again. But the reality is that's not what this town and this body approved in 2012. And then we turn around and change the zoning, change the density in maybe 14 or 16 when we dropped it from 12 to 8. And so I guess what I'm saying, this is not the right approach to address this.
May I make a recommendation that might help resolve the conflicts here? Low density residential gets you at 3 to 6 units per acre. We all know, and Commissioner, I don't know your name, but you made the comment that you come in at base density, and then there is the potential to go into a higher density. So maybe the reality of how we look at this property is if you designated the property as low density, 3 to 6 units per acre, as Commissioner Meyer said, when the concept plan comes in, what's the caveat to get over 3 units an acre? You have to provide some benefit to the local community, walking trails, pocket park, etc. So maybe if you made property F and I low density overall, with the idea that you would feather the density as you get to a lower density, budding Baldwin Park in property J, you would feather the density down something closer to 2 units an acre that's more consistent. If the developer is coming in and is providing that benefit, then you look at going more than 3 units an acre, closer to 4 units, 5 units, whatever makes sense in that area at the time that the concept plan, the plat, and everything else comes in. That gets you somewhere in the mid-range, and maybe that's a nice trade-off between the medium density and the lower density. I agree with Commissioner Myers. I think as you get behind the store, you could put a street of townhomes in there or something that might be 5 units an acre. And then, you have one row of those, and then you start going to lower density housing. I don't know. When we met August maybe of last year or the year before, Mark presented a good concept of what medium density looks like, these housing types we don't have with houses directly on the road. And I remember sitting in that meeting, and I remember Mark showing this, and I remember the folks from Baldwin Park saying, yeah, that looks pretty nice. That would be more consistent with what our plans are, not an apartment complex, but these homes that sit on the road, maybe have 2 or 3 condo units in a building, whatever. And I mentioned to Mark at the end of that meeting, I said, we did this with the S1 property that's on the west side of this property. We came together after Smith Road Apartments as a town, as residents, and a developer. We wrote the S1 ordinance, and we defined what that property should look like. At the end of that meeting, I said, why don't we do that here? Bring the residents, bring Horn Properties in, bring some representatives of the town and say, how do we do this that it makes it work for everybody? That might mean you have to write a new sort of medium density or low medium density development style that works, that gives you that change of housing choice. So I think those are 2 options that could be considered, is to look at what's really going to happen there and could we fix that. Everybody seemed to be in agreement out of that meeting. I will say at the Planning Commission, that never got discussed later that night. That idea of can we bring folks together and come up with a solution. I think that there is a solution there. It might be that the property ends up at 4 units an acre, 3 units an acre, 5 units an acre overall. But I think this is an opportunity for all of us, instead of yelling at each other and going back and forth, how do we come together, someone stand up and take the lead and say, let's discuss this, outside of this forum on how could we work together to solve that. But I think maybe 3 to 6 units an acre. If you want to go over 3 units an acre, the developer has to show they're providing a significant benefit to the area to allow them to get to 4 or 5 overall on that property. And as Commissioner Meyer said, properly feather the density against the existing neighborhoods. Just a thought.
Okay, do I have a motion of any kind?
Well, I think I and J should be reflected as very low-density residential. Given the character of that corridor, given the land use that's around it, it makes sense there. I don't have a problem with either G or F designating a portion of it LDR. I'm not entirely sure I want to see the whole thing LDR, but I understand that if you do put it as F and G as LDR, then you start at 3 units per acre. It still doesn't match the density at the Baldwin Park, but it does not make any sense for it to be medium density. It simply does not.
Low density here and low density there, and then they can decide how you transition within that, because that would be 3 to 6 units per acre on those two. I'm just trying to reflect what you all are talking about, because we're kind of all over the place.
I think a part of our problem here tonight is we're trying to treat this like a zoning meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're not allowing the flexibility that this future land use map should allow us. Mark, is there some verbiage that we can put in the proposal that makes a note of that this is in fact a guide and not a zoning map? Something that, I know we know that, but this might help resolve the issues here. Because I think we're close to an agreement here, I think, and I hate to have to, I understand what's the suggestion made, but I really hate to go back and start all over again, because I think there's a shorter path to a resolution that can satisfy us all. This is not a zoning map.
Well, that's what I've stated early on. This is a vision map. In fact, we never mapped the future land use intentionally for a long time. Ruth nor I, we had concerns about that, and this is exactly why. But anyway, you know, if you've got good policies like Noah's talking about and Mike Wilson, that's what drives your map and what happens on the land.
I'm going to advocate for the residents on this.
Yeah,
a lot of
and
times
that's right.
they feel very run over.
I mean, we had 3 very well-attended workshops, and we got a lot of feedback, so we were trying to,
And if
I'm kind of in the middle trying to present something that based on what we heard, and, but, there are certainly things that I understand all the different positions here, and you're transitioning and going from, low to higher density, and maybe there's some kind of compromise to allow that. I think what is on the screen might be an option as far as just future land use designations, because it does kind of give you that range to where you could potentially do that internal transition that's talked about in the plan. It's a different density than what we heard at the workshops.
Yes.
So that's all I'm saying.
John, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from.
So we're talking about the G and the F potentially going to LDR, which is 3 to 6 units per acre. The policy is states that the land use plan allows for you to start at 3 units an acre. And if you're demonstrating, under the exact words, if you're demonstrating quality to that area, you can move up in density. So, but 3 units per acre is what you're tied to the maximum for when you start with your plan.
So your question is?
Do you think you could explain that to the Baldwin Park residents, that you're still at a transition, 3 units, 2.34 units an acre? 3 units an acre to me is kind of R3, although most of our R3 falls under 3 units an acre. Does that make sense to you?
Well, first of all, I don't speak for Baldwin Park or any of the other 20 homeowners associations in Farragut. I just communicate with them. I think the consistent message is Farragut is densifying, and we're trying to not densify it. And so everything we're talking about is sort of this creeping density that's taxing the infrastructure and the highways and all that kind of stuff that you deal with all the time. Could I see my way through saying, okay, very low density might be okay there? Yeah, me personally, I'm not going to try to speak for hundreds of residents, but that could be a compromise that could work. I think perhaps we have the wrong people in the room to do that, and maybe the wrong format. So what Mike Wilson has proposed, and what some of you are proposing, is a different format where we have a workshop-ish like group together that we could talk about stuff like that. I think the reason the community is a little skittish about what numbers go on that document is we feel very much like we've had apartments rammed down our throats, and we're looking for a document that will give us some protection from that. And I know that your work wants to make sure that we transition those appropriately, but we're a little fearful that maybe that won't happen. So we're just looking for some certainty here, because we've been dealing with this for 7, almost 8 years now. We've been coming before you and looking for some resolution. So I'm in favor of getting the right people in the room and coming to some agreement. That includes landowners, it includes you all and residents that are here. Was that sufficiently vague as to be confusing?
I completely understand. I understand the desire on both sides of this. And I know that you guys have, in particular, it's exhausting for residents to have to come repeatedly. And what that's telling you, when residents are coming repeatedly and telling you they're opposed to this high density, is that your land use plan is wrong. It's like when you have to approve the same variance over and over and over again, it's telling you that your zoning needs to be addressed if you're dealing with the same variance. When residents consistently come out and say, this is not what we want, this is not what we want, this is not what we want, your land use plan is wrong. So they're telling us that it needs to be lower density than medium density, and I don't know that I feel comfortable making that decision based on the fact that public input said they wanted very low density residential. So I don't know where we go from here. I think I and J belong very low density residential. G and F is up in the air.
Are there other residents that would want to offer an opinion? I'll sit down.
Can you please give us your name and address?
Yep. Adam Atherton, 801 Andover. Great meeting. I learned a lot tonight. Thoughts on this? I think something I would like the commission to consider is, how do you weigh the owner's input? I think you should be thoughtful in that. How does that come into play? I like what Ed said earlier about the owner should have some weight in the decision, and we're going to talk about Ford's property here before midnight, I hope. And does he have a voice? Is it just one versus all the Glen Abbeys and Park Place? Perhaps so, but I think there should be some thoughtful weight given there. Also, there should be some thoughtful weight to what the commission themselves come in with. Your residents too, of course, but you have the knowledge on transitioning and the planning and all of those details. So that should be part of the equation as well.
Thank you.
I don't think we're going to resolve this tonight.
I'd say we're not.
No.
I think we take what we can that we agree with.
Yeah, is there a way to table G, F, and I?
Take G, F, and I out for now, and have
I and J, I think you all were looking at very low density. Is that what you suggested?
Need to be very low density residential.
Look at F and G as far as how do you promote a transition internally in those areas.
So do we want to have a motion that takes G and F out of the resolution?
Well, let's make sure we have I and J in first.
Say it on I and J. I is ours and J is Sam's.
Yeah.
What are you
Doug,
proposing?
you go to very low density residential on I and J, which is 2 to 4 units an acre.
2 to 4. Okay.
For you, that would be I.
That's what he wants.
And Sam
Okay.
too.
Okay.
Yeah. What about G and F? You're just taking out.
We're going to table that for further
Table
discussion.
that. Yeah.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So, are we
Wait a minute.
approving the map?
We're going to approve half a motion.
Are we approving the map other than F and G, and that would And that will, basically, it'll stay the same for now, but we're going to further evaluate those two areas.
That's what I'm hearing.
That's what it is.
I and J.
Other changes we had tonight, too?
Yes, right.
Oh, yeah.
I&J.
And there was other stuff, other revisions that we've had that we talked about an hour or two ago.
That was A through E.
Others
And there's the others on
are
the opposite side
okay
of Smith
except
Road.
for the F and G, and that's the two we need to evaluate more. Okay. Who made that motion? You?
I made the motion.
I'll second.
Whoa, let's back up. State the motion.
The motion is to approve the map amendments. I and J will be very low-density residential with that amendment, and G and F are taken out
They are as is.
to be,
You have to say they remain the same.
Remain the same.
remain
Remain the same. Yeah.
well,
You're not changing it, it's got to stay the same.
That's right. They're either changed or they're not changed.
We'll just say omitting any revisions to G and F.
G and F.
So,
with further workshops to be had,
okay.
because it's not,
Well, the work on this sector is not
Yes.
over.
Right, well, and I don't think we necessarily need to put that in.
well, you got to take it out.
Well, no, I mean, the part about not,
Well, I want it clear.
that we're going to look at it.
Yes. We need to make that clear that we're still looking at it. It's not,
That's the
we're not
action.
leaving it.
Stays the same.
Just as a housekeeping item, I think it's still dumb to keep E in there because it's already a B1 zoned buffer, and this is a future land use plan, and it's not consistent with the principles in our land use plan. But I'm just throwing it out there. I think it's
Whoa, who's the property owner on E?
probably Doug.
Doug, then
He already has zoning that protects it. That's in the zoning ordinance. I guess what I'm saying is that there's no point to having E on here because it conflicts with the principles of the land use plan.
But then that indicates that you're willing to take it out.
No, if it was rezoned, it'd have to come in front of this body, in front of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and have it rezoned to take it out. It'd be a whole nother action item. But it goes against all of our connectivity and the interface that we actually want.
You could still connect through that LDR as that buffer zone as a.
I guess what I'm saying is this is an additional layer to all. You may have a development plan that actually makes a lot of sense that interfaces with the back of those stores.
it uses it for transition.
That uses it for transition, and what you're putting another layer of bureaucracy on here for somebody to ever have to come in and say, "Hey, I've got an idea. This is what my idea is." But now we've got it on here, so well, it's protected as open space on the land use
All you
plan.
do is you change the land use plan.
I know, but it's a whole nother step in changing the land use
Okay,
plan.
it's one item on hey, this is a great project, and the community loves it, and so we're going to have a.
No, but I just don't understand how we can put a future land use plan, which is supposed to be that embody all the philosophies of the great ideas of the land use plan, and we're putting something on there that's contradictory to it.
Because it's 95 feet deep, and it's a berm, and it's heavily treated.
Zoned. It's zoned today in the
The
zoning
motion
ordinance,
and
which is
the-
a codified
The
document.
motion and the second on the floor is
That was
to
also
Issue that's
zoned.
worth arguing about.
Okay, let's
quite
listen to
frankly.
Mark.
resolution PC-22-10, changing I and J to very low density residential, leaving F and G as they are right now, pending further evaluation and working with the property owners and the residents to try to figure out a proper transition for those. And that's the motion. And it was
We have
seconded
to
by-
address A through D. We have to address K through M.
I think they stay the same. I don't know
They
what
stay
you're
the
saying.
same.
Yeah, everything, that's the
Okay.
only thing that changes. All the others are per what's proposed. The only thing that changed was I and J, and then F and G reverts back to what it is right now, pending further evaluation.
There you go.
You have that, Mark, basically? Okay.
I've got it.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Second.
You already said, we already got a
Second.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose?
Nay.
Okay.
Let's take another break.
Okay, we're going to take another 5-minute break here.
Yeah, just know it.
This time I'm getting the